Okay, perfect. So we're here today to talk about this amazing report from Seven Shifts and to really, dig into what the data says about the digital divide and kind of the gap in restaurant technology. And I'm so excited to have this group together because I think we all know, whether it's as guests or as operators, that technology can make or break a restaurant experience. And so we're going to dig into that in a little bit more detail. Our agenda for today is pretty straightforward. We're going to do some introductions and then spend a little bit of time looking at the Seven Shifts report. We plan to have some discussion with our panelists that we hope will be really fun and free-flowing. We'll make some time for our audience Q&A, and then we'll wrap things up. And again, just a note, this session will be recorded and posted online. So if you put something in the Q&A, feel free to include who you are and what company or organization you're from. If you prefer not to have that shared, just don't include that in your message, and we will not name you. Also, please feel free to put questions in the Q&A throughout the course of our presentation. I will weave them in when it makes sense, and if it doesn't quite fit, we'll save it for the end. Okay, I think that's all our housekeeping. So many of you already know Prep Shift, but for those of you who may be new or watching this on YouTube later, we are a women and minority business enterprise that provides coaching, consulting, and technical assistance to independent restaurants. We draw on our own experience, which we think is really important. And we also really ground our work in financial training and data to help owners and teams afford their values, meaning all of the great things that business owners want to do in the world are possible when they run profitable and sustainable businesses. The three members of the Prep Shift team are here. I won't make them introduce themselves, but they will be available to us. Dylan is our CFO, and he'll be sort of participating in this webinar, representing the voices of some of the restaurants that we work with that really don't use technology at all. We always want to look at who's not in the room when we're having these kinds of conversations. And of course, we work with a variety of businesses through our technical assistance work. So Dylan will be offering some of that perspective. Carla is also here. She is fresh back from vacation, so we are honored to have her join us, and she will also be participating as needed. And then I am also here. I'm Irene, the CEO, and most of you know that a lot of this stuff is personal for me because I ran my own food business through multiple iterations and evolutions for about 13 years. And a fun fact is that my company, Maymay, was Toast's second customer in 2013. So I've seen some stuff, and that's part of the conversation that we're excited to have today. Just to ground us a little bit, this is not just a celebration of restaurant technology, although we will do some celebrating. This topic really matters to us at Prep Shift because we see independent restaurants being more vulnerable than ever. And independent restaurants are a consequential portion of our industry. If you, like me, get tons of emails about restaurant technology, you know that we hear a lot of buzz about restaurant tech from those tech companies. But we don't always hear that much from operators. And if we do hear from operators, it's kind of mediated through those tech companies that want to sell us their software. So we're excited to not only present some great content from a tech company that we are big fans of, Seven Shifts, but also to hear directly from operators who maybe don't use all that much technology or have stayed kind of more analog for important reasons. And also in our work with Prep Shift, we recently released our diagnostic results report, which includes 100 plus operators and information about how they run their businesses. So that brings me to my last point here, which is that data on independent restaurants tends to be inadequate, and so are the solutions designed for them. So when we measure things, we can improve them, if we don't have great measurements about independence. And I don't just mean businesses like the ones that are here today, but restaurants where folks don't speak English with a high degree of comfort, businesses where email is not a preferred form of communication. We're not getting a ton of detail about what those businesses look like and what their challenges are. And so, as we know, access to technology and resources in the restaurant industry, like many things in our society, has always been unequal. And the gap that Seven Shifts kind of demonstrates through this report makes success even more uneven across the industry. And so, to support independence, we want to address this gap and really center the experiences of operators who have had successes and probably some failures when it comes to implementing technology. And we know that as kind of our industry continues to grow, we want to make sure that no one in the independent side is getting left behind because of a lack of access. So hopefully all of that is helpful context. And I am so delighted to introduce today's panelists. When I was pulling these headshots, I was like, is this AI? These are such great pictures. It's not AI, they're real photos. We are delighted to have three folks who we've worked with in different capacities. Maya from Jadu, Boston, August from Far Out Ice Cream, and Priscilla from Exodus Bagels. And starting on the left with Maya, we're going to invite them to introduce themselves and follow some of the prompts that we have here on this slide.
All right, cool. Hello, everyone. And hi to Priscilla and August. Excited to hear your relationships to technology too. My name is Maya Mukhopadhyay. My pronouns are she, her. The business name is Jadu, and the concept is a coffee shop by day, wine bar by night. And then I like to say like neighborhood gathering spot always. So the first and foremost goal of it was really to be kind of a third space for people. And I just think that food and beverage are conduits to that. Um, Relationship with technology generally. Um, yeah, so prior to opening Jadu, I worked in tech companies, or tech adjacent companies. So I worked at Bose, the audio company, and then consulted for companies like the New York Times and Nike, and actually Square as well. So I think my relationship to technology is like one who has worked and seen the insides of it and how the sausage is made and then like come out now on the other side as um I mean, we're all users of technology all the time, but like certainly on the business side, kind of holding these two minds of like I know how they're thinking about like features and prioritizations, but then also just as an operator kind of being frustrated sometimes of like what I can and can't do with the technology. Um, the tools I use in my business. So I really have tried to consolidate everything within Square, which is what I decided to use as my point of sale. Happy to talk more about why later. So I use Square for certainly my POS, but also payroll, also scheduling. Um, I could send out email marketing from there, but I haven't really activated that yet. So yeah, that's kind of like my one-stop shop for everything. And I don't, I guess my favorite becomes irrelevant then because it's all one thing. The results of my seven shifts quiz, I was in the growing stage, which is the second stage, I believe.
Awesome. And Maya, can you share with everyone what Jadu means?
Yes, thank you. So Jadu means magic in Hindi. And so the name for the space is sort of also the like aspiration for the space and the concept, which is that when you have food, beverage, hospitality, and just like you're with the people that you love in this space, that is a form of magic that we all kind of feel, I think, and aspire to in our various businesses. But yeah.
Love that. Thank you for sharing, Maya. We'll go next to August and then to Priscilla after that.
Hey everyone, August, he, him far out ice cream, and the concept is New Zealand style ice cream. So we get a machine from New Zealand, and imagine a mixing cone and an auger. You take really good ice cream, a scoop of vanilla, a scoop of chocolate. We do dairy and non-dairy, and your choice of fruit. You put that in the mixing cone, and it blends together, and it comes out creamy, delicious. It's fantastic. My relationship to technology generally, bit of a love-hate relationship, I suppose. On my phone, I constantly have grayscale, and I have an app that I that I pay for that like makes it virtually impossible for me to get on any social media. Um, like none of it. So, but also understand the value of it and the efficiencies gained by using technology. So, I definitely embrace it. I'm a heavy user of AI, and always looking for different ways to have that improve my life. The tools I use for my business. So we've consolidated. We're heavily in Toast and Restaurant 365. We use Toast for our POS, our kiosks at the store, marketing. We use Sling, and then Restaurant 365 is our accounting, our operations software, our reporting software. Um, so those are kind of the predominant softwares that we use. And then my results in the seven shift quiz, it was like if there were four quadrants, was it three or four quadrants? I can't remember, but I was the second to last in terms of sophistication, I suppose is how you'd put it. I can't remember
Yeah,
what the
I think that's the integrated phase. So we'll come back to that. Cool. Thank you,
setting.
August.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much to PrepShift for having us and for everyone for being here. My name is Priscilla Andrade. Pronouns are she, hers, and Exodus Bagels is my business, or our business, I should say. We hand shape, boil, and bake in the traditional way, bagels, or, there's a lot of contention about what is a true bagel. We believe ours is as accurate as it can be for us. Been very blessed to have longtime support in the community. So our relationship or my relationship with technology personally, I'm a little bit of a Luddite. I'm an analog girly. I like, printed pages and things like that. I still handwrite a lot of things. But I think similarly, I'm in this like hybrid negotiating relationship with technology where I know it has a lot of value. Um, I think my challenge with it sometimes in these contexts, like with the apps that are available to us, is that they're sort of templates that then we have to apply to very specific scenarios that we're all engaging with, depending on people's needs on our team, accessibility, language, as mentioned before, and just sort of comfortability even, and just generally engagement, So tools I use or we use in our business, we use 7 shifts for scheduling and communications. We also use 7 punches for our punch in and punch out. We use Toast as our main point of sale. We also just recently integrated into Toast Catering. Before that, we used Bento, which was another helpful platform, but again, just another lane to be working in. So as much as possible, trying to integrate things into Toast. So I think that might be if I had to pick a favorite, Toast would be it only because it's offering so much more. Similarly to what Irene mentioned, we were an early adopter, or it felt like that way anyway, where they were mostly operating on the POS system. But they've grown, and so they're offering a lot more, and we're kind of reverse engineering to streamline a little bit more our processes and keep everything sort of in one place. The other thing that we've used sort of as a middle of the road success is EdApp, which PrepShift helps us launch to do some of the sort of onboarding, training, and just like resourcing to the team. And that one's a little bit hard to maintain engagement on. So that would be something that I'm curious about how this conversation will illuminate options and or insight from all of you fellow users. And for the results of the 7 shifts quiz, we got integrated. So we're in the integrated stage. So yeah, we'd like to do more. And I think leverage those systems in a way that work most effectively for the team, but also for the customer.
Thank you, Priscilla. And thank you everyone for your introductions. I'm already picking up on some important themes, especially around like consolidation of technology, and also maybe like our ambivalence around technology. Nobody got into this business so that we could play with technology, but it's something that helps us stay in business and hopefully make businesses easier to run. So that's going to close out our introductions. We're now going to move to a kind of overview of 7Shift's digital prep list. This is available online, and we can share out copies of it if you haven't been able to access it yet. But we are really pleased to be able to partner with 7Shifts in some of the data collection and reporting that they do. Again, having data about independence is really, really important to us. And so this was a great project. I'm going to talk briefly about, sorry, my slides are out of order here. I'm going to skip ahead and then go back. So just a couple notes on methods. There were a little over 500 restaurants surveyed here, and they included more detailed interviews as well as just straight surveys. And they really kind of run the gamut in terms of size, employee headcount, revenue levels, multi-location versus single location. But primarily these were independent restaurants that were surveyed. As you have heard from our guests, there was also a scoring system quiz created to help operators kind of take what's in the report and understand what their best next steps might be in terms of moving their business forward with technology. So I'm going to go back a slide. These were the 4 stages of restaurant tech articulated by 7Shifts. And as you can see, sort of stage 1 is starting. Stage 2, growing, is I think where Maya scored. And then August and Priscilla at Far Out and Exodus were in stage 3, integrated. And as you can see from these descriptions, growing and integrated, this kind of messy middle, these were the biggest groups represented in the data, which I think should come as no surprise to us. And so we're going to dig into this a little bit. Before we do that, I'm thinking, actually, no, let's dig in. Okay, so just a quick overview of stage 1 starting. And in a moment, I'm going to ask Dylan to comment on this based on our experience with less kind of tech forward businesses that we've worked with at PrepShift. Carla also welcome to chime in, although I didn't brief her beforehand about this, so no pressure. But yeah, stage 1 is kind of these classic businesses that have sort of like, they do it on paper and they've always done it on paper. Typically, if you're going to a business where they only take cash, where we're looking at paper tickets and checklists, this is a business that's kind of in the starting stage. In our experience, these businesses rely really heavily on owner presence because the owner knows everything. It all lives up here. So they have a personal touch with guests and staff, and they really rely on those relationships and perhaps not so much on systems that can make those relationships less critical or less kind of reliant on an individual person. About let's see. A third of these businesses are really long-standing. So just because we're putting them in stage 1 doesn't mean they're doing anything wrong or that they can't be successful. We probably all can think of a business that we love that's been around forever that kind of runs this way. I'll give a shout out to the Busy Bee restaurant in Brookline, RIP, but they were cash only and paper tickets for the longest time, and I think they were around for 25 years. And so 7Shifts shares that some of what this looks like, paper schedules or whiteboards, relying really on experience and observations to make decisions. And then the other thing I would call out here is just relying on face-to-face communication. If you've got a really small team and everyone's in the restaurant every day, why do you need an app to manage your communication? There are also a couple of case studies here that are included at different points in the 7Shifts digital prep list report. So definitely encourage folks to go and check that out in more detail. But I'll give Dylan a second to just chime in about some of the businesses we've worked with that are kind of in this stage. And then would love to also hear if anyone from our panel would like to chime in, please feel free.
Yeah, thank you, Irene. So I think there are a couple different profiles. I'll just highlight two of them. One would be the longstanding business that things work well enough, as Irene said, relies on the owner, but often family-run small teams of maybe five, six folks with set schedules, and those businesses will often have some kind of advantage that allows them to not have the urgency to adopt technology to solve problems. Maybe they own their building, maybe they've been in it so long, they have a great relationship with the landlord, and it's kind of rents that are below average levels. There's something that allows them just to kind of continue as they are, and who could blame them? So those are cases where you'd be kind of trying to convince people of problems they might not be really experiencing. And then another group would be businesses that are hoping that technology will just sort of magically solve a problem that where there's no pre-existing system, and it's just like, let's just insert this technology into a void and hope that it connects things. I think oftentimes, folks that are selling the technology to restaurants will sell that magic solution, and then implementation is sort of halfway done, or the business owner just otherwise does not have the systems in place to succeed with it. And then it's sort of this reinforcing cycle of like, I told you I never needed that stuff. And then it gets rejected and you go back to the way things were before.
Yeah, that's a great point, Dylan, that if you're selling these tools to people who really aren't experiencing the pain points, you might not get very far. So that I think is really valuable, but also begs this question of like, how do we address the digital divide and ensure that those restaurants are able to get what they need when they need it? Let's go to stage two, which is growing. So businesses that are in the growing stage sometimes rely on software tools, but they might be more generic. So for example, a more standardized POS versus a point of sale that's built specifically for restaurants. Perhaps, Google Sheets, Google Drive, and not something that is designed for restaurants. And I think one of the things that I thought about when I read this is that a lot of times these tools are not team facing, or they don't have a structure of like permissions and hierarchy that allows the team to really be engaged and get involved. In many cases, it can feel like there's more work that gets kind of created through maintaining multiple systems. And so if there's like manual repetition or entry of data, sometimes that can cause more confusion. And then from Seven Shifts report, a lot of times this looks like, again, using Excel or Google Sheets for tracking information, and using a kind of manual inventory with like spreadsheets rather than doing some kind of software. And I think for all of us, I suspect we have solved for gaps in technology by creating another spreadsheet that ties multiple things together. I don't know if that ever goes away, to be totally honest. But I think that this is sort of where operators sometimes like try to start adopting things and really feel the pain of that implementation. So I wanted to just see, so Maya, since you kind of fell into this category, I'm wondering if there's anything in here you want to comment on, feel free to say now.
Could you go back to the
Yeah,
slide? Yeah, so I'm curious to see what the integrating looks like when we get there, but it's funny, like when the starting persona or profile came on, I was like, oh, I relate to a lot of that in terms of
totally.
like owner presence and like things in my head. So on the one hand, I think I relate to that. On another, like not having seen the integrated, I feel like there's some of that in that I am using, one tool for like POS, payroll, scheduling and teams,
Totally.
scheduling and communication. So, yeah, I'm just kind of thinking through like how much of this feels true and this the growth phase feels true to my day-to-day presence, but also I guess the other thing that's coming up is to your point, like what do you actually need for the like place that you're in? Um, So for example, yeah, like our inventory process is pretty manual right now, but I like can't imagine what like a super, if even like a super sophisticated data-driven process would like really meet us where we're at in the moment.
Yeah, inventory is one of the things that I think is really a challenge to implement. It relies so much on the team. It's not something that the owner can just manage themselves. So maybe we'll circle back to that. And again, I should say that, when you take the quiz, it averages your score. So in some cases, your technology for payroll might be integrated, but perhaps your technology for inventory would look more like a starting business. So none of these are kind of categorically imposed on your businesses. And that brings us to stage 3, which is integrated. And the quote here is, "I'm starting to connect the dots." I think as a small business owner, I've had that thought many times. These are businesses that are really kind of actively shopping for, testing, and willing to pay for restaurant specific software tools. They've probably moved on from kind of the major pain points, sort of the must have technology, and now they're focused on things that are allowing them to kind of streamline and optimize. And part of streamlining, of course, is delegation. So if you are able to have, for example, in 7 shifts, an owner level account, a manager level account, an employee level account, that allows for more collaboration across the team. And I think importantly, it's not all smooth, but they're starting to see some return on investment of their time and their dollars. Couple examples here from the report: scheduling software, dedicated team communication apps, and still integration challenges. So that's why I think many of us feel the pressure to go for some kind of all-in-one solution. But of course, that also creates its own challenges. I don't know, Priscilla or August, if you want to kind of emphasize any of these, or if this kind of maps to your experience, but I'll give you just a moment to chime in if you wish. Go ahead, August.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of, there's a couple things you said that's been pretty evocative. One is the kind of, I don't want to call it snake oil, but like the believing that software is going to solve the problem. We've certainly fallen for that a number of times. And then, you just said, the integration is starting to pay off. I think in a number of cases, I've, sorely misunderestimated how difficult the integration is going to be with a software, how long it would take. I mean, Restaurant 365, we started the sales process and integration and in before the new year, and we're just now starting to get what I would consider reliable data from it, which is absolutely necessary to do the things that we're going to need to do, but it's never just as easy as you might think, or a salesperson might make you believe.
Yeah. And August, could you share a little bit about what you use Restaurant 365 for those of us who are not as familiar?
Yep. So we use it for a lot of things, but it's our payroll, it's our accounting, and it's our operational reporting. So we do our inventory through, I mean, what I'm referring to specifically is like our inventory and our it gives us a P&L each week, based on each of our units and how they're doing. And we run inventory weekly to get, somewhat reliable, primes. And yeah, that's the goal. I think that what I had thought was it was going to give us a picture perfect P&L each week that we'd be able to, just keep costs exactly where we want them. And, in practice, it's a lot harder than that, obviously. But I think what we're able to do now is look back and really dig into, what's costing us a ton of money. I'll give you an example is like, we found out we're going to spend like $10,000 on gloves this year. And it's just like, geez, that's an outrageous amount of money, and that's just, unacceptable. So things like that, where it's just a lot easier to identify where you might be bleeding. That's how we're hoping to use it moving forward. But right now we've been using it for our reporting and our accounting.
Got it. And just for our audience, Far Out Ice Cream has 3 locations, as well as a catering and events unit. So when August talks about the different units, that's how many we're looking at. Priscilla, anything standing out to you from this discussion of stage 3?
Yeah, I guess I would echo some of what August mentioned about the implementation, that having the tool, there's no plug and play. It's not like you're just going to do it and then suddenly it's all resolved. And even when you get those systems in place, I think one of the challenges is bringing people along, particularly if you're holding folks from the very early stages of the business. They're used to like, just text me. But no, I just posted on 7 Shifts, right? And I think there is a little bit of like digital fatigue. I don't know if that's a real thing, but where people are just like so inundated all the time in their inboxes of various, positions that it can sort of fall off the list for them. So maybe they saw the message, but they didn't really like sit with it or, internalize what was being communicated. And I think what's standing out to me most is what you mentioned earlier, which is different sections of our business are in different stages. So I would say our inventory is still very, printed out paper list, whiteboard, and double check, the pantry, and then a quick text like, hey, we're out of, such and such. So that's an area where we're lagging versus, our like catering we've just onboarded with Toast, and that's been a huge growth spurt for us is to be able to say like, oh, this is actually a much easier system than what we were doing before. But again, even within those systems, with Toast, we've had to kind of amend the template to work with our inventory model, which is changing every day, right? Like what bagels are available, what flavors, et cetera. So yeah, I think that it's exciting in that, and I'll borrow from Dylan, that it's an opportunity, right? That we see this gap as an opportunity to try and figure out like what can we implement to make it a little bit more seamless, knowing that there will forever be seams.
I love that. And so that kind of brings us to stage 4, strategic. So knowing that there are seams, but hiding them as much as possible. So, stage 4 is really where the tech tools are working together without too much oversight or kind of manual duplication or workarounds. These businesses, 7Shifts says, also have capacity to kind of experiment with new things. So AI and other tools that might be getting rolled out. And of course, the more tech you have, the more access to data that supplements your gut feeling. And one of the things I appreciated that 7Shifts really emphasized in this report is that it's not about getting rid of the human touch. It's about complementing it and allowing the humans in your business to do their jobs better. And really that hospitality still starts and ends with people, but these tools can help us. So a couple things about these businesses that are in more of a strategic phase. Because 7Shifts is now offering payroll, they really emphasize kind of monitoring labor costs, having automated tip pooling systems. At Maymay, tip pooling always has been and always will be a challenge with so many different roles and different kinds of tipped employees. And just in general, again, kind of underscoring most systems are connected and there's minimal manual work. So fewer separate tracking spreadsheets where we're doing all of this. And so just as a reference point, this is kind of how 7Shifts is mapping the stages of restaurant technology. And again, you might fall in one of these different categories based on the specifics of your business. So to close out the review of the digital prep list, I think 7Shifts recognizes that restaurants are adopting new technology all the time. And so helping businesses understand what's going to move the needle. And also to your point, Priscilla and August, like have realistic expectations about what technology is and what it can do is super important. And again, this point that some operators are going to always be in that stage 1, and that's okay. If the systems work, there is not necessarily a need to complicate them further. But if there are going to be changes in the business, often that is the time when adopting technology can start to make more sense. I want to pause for a question from the audience, which is, how are these platforms helping you make decisions in your business? Are they helping you with solutions, or do they just kind of spit out data? And probably there are different answers depending on the technology that we're talking about. But I will see if August wants to start. Maybe some examples of decisions that you're making. You shared a great one with the gloves.
Yeah, the gloves is a good one. I mean, I think previously this is, I don't mean to drag extra chef through the mud, but previously we were using extra chef and we just saw like a tremendous variability month over month in our cost of goods, which would connote that it's incorrect, that we're not getting accurate reporting. So, I mean, just starting there as a baseline to understand like what our cost of goods actually is at each one of our locations is, probably the biggest thing. You can't manage what you can't measure. So that's the biggest thing. So I'd say we look at that and then we say, all right, we need to get this down, and what are the difficult decisions that we need to make in order to get this down. And I think without that knowledge, but there's plenty of other things that we're using, Toast and Sling and Restaurant 365 for to help us, one of the things that Toast just launched is the Toast IQ, and there's, one of the features I'm super excited for is that they have a tremendous amount of data just having all the customers, and you can ask it like, how does my pricing compare to other ice cream restaurants in Boston and Massachusetts and United States? And that can help you establish your elasticity of demand and how you should be charging. And it's very difficult right now for us to determine if we're too expensive, not expensive enough, because everything is just ballooning so much. So those are just some examples.
Thanks, August. Priscilla or Maya, an example of a solution that you were able to derive from some data?
I think a lot of it is kind of, well, I'll say for Toast, one of the things that's been helpful or beneficial is the data we get in sort of week to week performance on our revenue, and then year to year, since we've been working with or using Toast for a long time. That's helpful, but I basically look at any piece of data that comes across my desk with an asterisk, that there's something that maybe miscatalogued or not measured in the sort of traditional sense. And in part, we still suffer from like founder syndrome of having a lot of labor in particular that is not measured in the traditional sense, and that there's a lot of like, we're just going to get it done energy that doesn't bode well for systems building or doesn't necessarily allow for that. So I would say that's primarily it, is just being able to have a live pulse on the day to day, like being able to see those quick reports in Toast. Sorry. Yes, in Toast. And with 7 shifts, I think the ease of communication, being able to reach individuals or groups within the business or the everybody on staff pretty effectively and seamlessly, and even being able to see like who saw this, who reviewed it, etc. That's something that I feel like is pretty actively supportive for us on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, for me, I think the way I think about data is like it's not necessarily something that we have to act on, but it's like a gut check of like, okay, now I know this information and how do I feel about it? So, not a super sophisticated but super useful tool that we used is like recipe cost calculator. To just kind of understand like what our ingredients in our dishes are costing us. And so early on, like realized that we were underpricing like we have an avocado toast with smoked salmon, and both the avocado and the smoked salmon were underpriced. And it got to a point where like every time a like guest ordered an avocado toast in my mind, I'd be like mad at them. So that's like telling me something like, okay, just increase your prices.
Totally.
So like that was like a very clear and easy, like, okay, here's what the data is telling me and here's what I can do about it. On the flip side of like maybe I won't take action on something like, Square tells me what dishes aren't selling as much. So we have a dish called the meze situation, which like really it doesn't sell. It's not like it's definitely like not selling as high relative to other dishes on the menu, but people love it. And I think it has a place on the menu conceptually. So it's sort of okay, again, I've seen the data and I'm okay with it. We're just gonna like let it hang out on the menu. And then like a third kind of overarching one is, using QuickBooks um for like monthly P&Ls and just keeping a tab on like where are my cogs at and how do I feel about that? And, does it feel like we need to drive it down more or are we kind of okay with where it is? So I would say those are the three probably on an ongoing basis that I'm kind of keeping an eye on.
That's great. Thank you all. And I think one of the things that came up in each of your answers is like, you have to decide how much you trust the data in order to build a solution around it. And that I think can be a challenge, especially knowing that we all have a lot of moving pieces in our businesses. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for our discussion portion. We did have another question come through in Q&A, which is, if you were starting again and know what you know now, what technology would you adopt and in what order? And no need to throw anyone under the bus, but feel free. I think I'll go first and just say signing up with Toast was really smart for us. I don't think it was a smart decision at the time, to be honest, because it was such a new company, but it all worked out in the end at May. And I would also say that we started out with a very kind of like homegrown payroll solution with like a local company. And I kind of wish we had adopted something a little bit more streamlined. That being said, that was 13 years ago. So I don't know that there were more streamlined options. And so, part of the message I think is like, we do the best we can with what's out there. And so that is always going to be a factor is what's the market offering us. August, you look ready to share.
I'm smiling just because I think about this question, not just from a technology perspective, but like just generally, probably 2 or 3 times a week. Like, God, if I had only known that when I started, like the amount of time I would have saved and money I would have saved. But I'd probably say what we're on now. I think there's like a saying, it's like it has to do with capitalism, but let's say with Toast, it's like Toast is the worst POS except for every other POS out there is like how I feel about Toast. It's like it's like it's I look at our P&L and it's like the amount that we're getting charged for credit card processing. And every time I go to that team and be like, hey guys, like we're doing more volume, can we can we get better rates? They're just like they're like, no, like this is the best we can do. Or they'll send you something super insulting. But I think I would probably say just to go with my business partner always says go with the gorilla, which is like go with Toast, go with Restaurant 365. And I think that's probably just a good rule of thumb because they're the best for a reason, and the likelihood that they're going to continue to invest in innovation and just continue to get better and better and better. Like we evaluate in the beginning Square, and then we've also evaluated Byte because of their kiosks. Um, and we just stayed with Toast because they're focused on restaurants. So they're very much in this world. They know what, restaurateurs go through, what they need, and they're constantly looking to add features that will help restaurants. So I think they're going to be at the peak of innovation. And then, I feel the same way with Restaurant 365. I wouldn't be surprised if the two companies became one at some point. But that would be my opinion.
Thanks, August. Really helpful. I'll go over to you, Maya. Knowing, I don't know if we mentioned this before, but Jadu has been open for 2 years, year and a half.
No, we're like
A
at
year.
10 months.
Oh my God. Well, I've been there enough times. I know this. Yeah, I mean, it hasn't been that long since you started. But yeah, any reflections on what you might do differently, if anything?
Yeah, I don't know that I would do anything differently. I think something everyone's echoed in different ways is that there is no silver bullet, worst POS, except relative to everything else out there. And then I really liked what Priscilla said about like they're all just like templates that you try your best to like fit into your business. And so for me, like, of course, I looked at Square and Toast, and the unique thing about the unique and challenging thing about our business from like a point of sale standpoint is that we're essentially two businesses in the same space. And, the coffee shop is counter service. The wine bar is table service. So between 3 and 5 p.m., there's literally a transformation of the space, the service, and also the like point of sale system where we like switch modes
Mm-hmm.
in Square from like cafe to wine bar, which means that like checks print out differently, the tipping like options are different, etc. So like no silver bullet. For me, I felt like Square was like the more suited to cafes and counter service, and that Toast seemed to me, I could be mistaken, more suited to like table service. It's sort of like what use case did each one of those start with and then add on. I think like Square started with a counter service and then added on table service, which means their table service model is lacking a little bit. Whereas Toast, I think, started with the restaurant model and then added counter service. Again, I could be wrong. Um, so no regrets first. Like, I don't know that if I had started from scratch today and picked something else across the board, that it would be like better. And I think it's like fine enough for what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, yeah, that's my super insightful answer.
No, I think that's good, and I think it makes sense, and the themes that are emerging are pretty consistent here. Priscilla, do you want to add anything about what you might do differently?
Yeah, I think I'm in a similar sort of boat of like, I don't know that I could have changed anything, but if I were truly starting over today, I think part of it would be, like I said, to go with the gorilla, so to speak, and I would probably select Toast for all its integrated facets because now
Mm-hmm.
we've kind of, like I mentioned before, we're sort of reverse engineering. We had all these different platforms that were taking care of different responsibilities or sort of lanes within the business and trying to now integrate them into one place. And sometimes I have even my own reservations about that. Putting all your eggs in one basket can be intimidating or a little unnerving because then an error is wholesale instead of, in a lane. So
Yeah.
I think that would be, the primary change. But otherwise, I think it's hard when you're a small business again, these larger templated systems sometimes are more than what you need or not precisely what you need. And so it still requires some tinkering and like um, amendments to make it functionable for whatever you're, launching.
Yeah, the customization as a theme has come up a lot, and knowing that you all have different concepts, sometimes multiple types of business activities taking place at once, whether it's catering or service or a different service. Um, so thank you for that. We have a question from Jessica, who's from the Seven Shifts team. Thanks so much for being here, Jessica. Her question is, what do you think are some of the biggest barriers for restaurants to advance their technology stage? And you could speak from personal experience or share things anecdotally. I think one thing I would just put out there is I feel like word of mouth is so important when it comes to new technology. There's a degree of trust that is perhaps hard to achieve between like a salesperson and their lead. But when you hear from other operators, I feel like that can be really valuable. So I would put that out there, having customer advocates. And yeah, would love to hear if anyone else has thoughts on what some of those barriers are. And at some point, we'll let Dylan and Carla, if she wishes, chime in about what we're seeing from our restaurants who are much closer to kind of stage one.
Yeah, I would just chime in because I mentioned this before we actually started the official call, but one of the hardest things is that once you start rolling this ball down the hill and starting a business is that then you're just in it. And so you're operating, and it can be challenging to halt and sort of get to that foundational base or that bedrock of what you're doing and make those systemic changes, particularly if it is something that's a new sort of adaptation for everybody in house. Like I mentioned before, bringing people along can be challenging, like adopting a new method, even if it's better, even if it's an improvement than what was happening, change is just hard for people. And so, we were using paper. Why this worked fine? Why do we have to go to this online platform? And then it just takes some of that time, so it requires a little bit more persistence. But I think more than anything, it's just taking the opportunity to slow down, evaluate, and commit to the change and sort of deal with the limited but definitely existing fallout that comes with change.
Great point, Priscilla. I really relate to that.
Yeah, I would really echo the same thing, but to me, moving up stages implies, or in my head implies, switching tools. And that to me seems like I would have to like close the business for a minimum of a week to like, port things over to a new system, get it all implemented, um, which is, just feels like not a path forward. So I think that's part of why for a lot of small businesses, you kind of just like make do with what you have versus because even just like mentally getting to the place of saying, okay, yes, I want to like switch to a different system, is like even just like thinking about that is crazy, let alone doing it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think that in many cases, I feel like people who are selling underestimate the challenges of implementation, especially if you're switching. Sometimes it's easier if there was no system and then you adopt software, but if you're going from one tool to another, that can be really challenging. August, what do you think about the barriers?
So just to be clear, when you say stages, are we talking about implementing change or implementing new software, or just generally,
Yeah, I think Jessica's question is about kind of the stages as articulated in the report. So how do businesses, move towards something that's more integrated?
um, yeah, I mean, I think first I'll speak to like, I was in software sales, and I think, it's not, the salesperson does not look at it as their job to ensure a smooth integration. It's their job to sell the software. So they're going to tell you no matter what that like, oh, we have the best integration team and it's going to be a breeze, and everyone, it's, and I'm guilty. I've been guilty of that in a previous life. So I'm at least empathetic to it.
Karma, man.
Yeah, seriously. Um, but for us, I have like a horror story. We transitioned, and this was a very needed transition. I'll die on the sword, but our ice cream, because it's a new concept, requires a lot of explanation. And as a result of it, we had teammates that were both like in a traditional ice cream sense, you take the order, you make the ice cream, like that's, or you can have someone, at POS and they take the order, and then other people make it. Those are ways you can do it, but for us, it just the process was just painfully slow because everyone wants to know what the process, like what it is, obviously, which makes total sense, and then they want to know what your favorite is, and then they deliberate, and then they, and that compounds over a large period. And for us, our business happens from 7 to 10. Like that's when we do the majority of our business, and most of it's on the weekends. So it just became really challenging. And I was like, all right, kiosks are the answer. And I literally planned the kiosks, I made the menu, blah, 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 blah. And I didn't really like tell the team. I just like one day we had kiosks. And like, what a disaster. It was so bad. And the team, there was all sorts of like unforeseen, now very obvious, but like backlash on like, are you trying to replace us? Like, I thought we cared about hospitality, a million other things. And, I think what I've learned as I've gone forward is if there's going to be a big change, it's like communicate early and often, over communicate, and enroll them in why this is going to be beneficial for them. Like the with them, what's in it for me, just let them and help them understand, how this is going to impact them in a positive way in most cases.
That's a great point, August. And again, being focused on the solution is of course part of the job, but thinking about all the different ways that might be challenging is something that, in addition to all the things on your plate, could be hard to keep in mind. I have one more question for discussion because we've talked a lot about team experience of technology. I'm curious if anyone wants to shout out whether it's a software or a module, but something that your teams really like, or that they've adopted pretty happily. I know that in many businesses, like if your leadership is switching the tech systems over and over again, there is a fatigue, as you said, Priscilla, that can come from that. So yeah, just wondering if anyone wants to shout out any systems that really have worked for the team, whether it's for their features or for a careful implementation. Just want to open that up.
I think I would just shout out the Seven Shifts announcements and chat capability. I'm sure those exist on the other platforms, but since it's what we've used and have that sort of reservation or apprehension about shifting once something is already working. I think particularly even internally, there's like a varied sense of use. Like one department uses chats really effectively consistently pretty much every day. And so I've been trying to replicate that with other teams. Like, hey, that's a really effective way of communicating. It's live. It also gives people the opportunity to engage sort of as they're ready. And it lets information, travel a little bit more effectively instead of, you show up one day at work and there's this change and you didn't really know that it was coming. I just that for me, we relied on that pretty significantly is being able to do that direct chat and full group announcement on the platform.
Thanks, Priscilla. August, you look ready again.
Well, I'm laughing because my answer is the same as Priscilla's. We use Sling, but I can say that we're on Restaurant 365's like team communication for a bit, and it just didn't get the job done. So like I would imagine that Seven Shifts is great. Sling, it's great. It was pretty good on home base, but I know that it's super valuable when it works, and if it like you need to be able to communicate with your team. Like that's just we always use the term like being able to pass the torch from one shift to the next, and that I'm sure Seven Shifts is great. Sling does it well too, and I think that's something that like the team interacts with every single day. The only thing I would say is the Toast handhelds have been pretty nifty. They're really easy to use.
Great, thanks, August.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also going to introduce another question that just came in through Q&A, which is about using tech to manage direct labor costs and staffing. Is there a tool that allows for that, or is it just like we get the data and then we adjust as quickly and nimbly as we can?
I will try to explain what we do, which is kind of manual and clunky, so it might not be answering the question, but maybe we'll shed insight anyway. So we like clock in, clock outs, etc. Our schedules are tracked through Square, and payroll is run through Square. But in order to calculate our labor costs at the end of the month, I go into like a spreadsheet of like my like monthly P&L, and I look at what I paid people in the last month. But in payroll, that is tips and tax and like just like base wages. And so I can't just like take the number that comes from Square. I have to like take the wages number and then the tips number separately for a different thing. So there is a little bit of like disaggregation I need to do, and therefore I only do it on a monthly basis because I'm not really like tracking that week to week, um, to get just like a gut sense of like how my labor costs are doing. And I may feel differently about this at some point, but I think that like looking at it on a monthly basis is probably fine for us versus feeling very nervous on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis of whether we're going up or down, because there is like seasonality in our business, and therefore like we can have like a really crazy day and then like a couple of slower days, and so it sort of averages out.
Thanks, Maya. Just with attention to the time, I'm going to put this QR code up for some feedback. We would love to hear from you about what we did well and what we can do better. And if anyone needs to excuse themselves, please feel free. I did want to just offer a chance for anyone to give one parting thought. And again, I want to emphasize that a lot of our work as Prep Shift happens with folks who are not usually part of this conversation, who aren't really even in the room or being counted when it comes to this work. So we're so grateful for the three of you, our panelists, for joining us. And of course, we all know that there's a whole swath of independents out there that aren't able to think or talk or access this kind of stuff. So we have great respect for all those different kinds of businesses in our industry. So yeah, I'll open it up just for one last thought if anyone wants to provide one. And thank you so much for being with us.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you. Thanks for the participation. I think one of the things that is hardest in small business is that, you know, it's hard not to be siloed and sort of in your ocean of decisions and challenges. It's really helpful to be in community. So huge shout out to you all and Prep Shift for always bringing that to the foreground, to letting us to work together and offer each other some insight and support, and at the very least, some commiseration on the challenges, but certainly also offering solutions. And I think in part making it more accessible to those of us who maybe were operating in that way that you're mentioning, that we're not at the table or don't necessarily have the skills or the exposure to some of these tools. So thank you for grounding that for us and offering the path forward. Really appreciate it.
You're so welcome, Priscilla. Thank you.
I think Priscilla just nailed it. I wouldn't add anything else. I think.
All right. Well, with that, yeah, thank you all so much again. It's a pleasure to get to spend time with you. It's always a treat to convene operators. And we look forward to hearing folks' feedback. And yeah, that's all we have for today. So go off, do your wonderful work, and we look forward to seeing you next time. I'm going to stop our recording and we'll call it a day.